introduce David. David Reekie lives in Fordwich and has loved walking Old Park for 30 years. After a career as a dentist in Herne Bay, he now devotes his time to walking and local history. He's chair of Canterbury Ramblers and leads guided history walks in and around Canterbury. He also gives local history talks for the Canterbury Festival and other local organisations. So if I could now hand over to David to give his talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Can you hear me at the back, first of all? Good. Okay, I'll try and speak up a bit. So I'm going to give you a talk today on the history of Old Park, which I've written a book called Secrets of Old Park, which will be on sale later on. So this is about Canterbury's forgotten historic landscape. Now, one thing I want to really get over to tonight is the importance of the total landscape we're talking about here. Now, I'm using a new laptop here, which I'm not familiar with, so forgive me if technology lets me down occasionally. But I'm a keen walker. When I retired from dentistry, I devoted myself to my twin passions of walking and of local history. And I spent a lot of time, happy hours walking in Old Park, part of it. This is Canterbury Ramblers, of which we have 320 members locally, and we have walks throughout the year, at the weekends, usually 2 walks every week. And it's a great organisation to join if you love the countryside and are interested in preserving our public rights of way. And of course, the Ramblers are a campaign organisation. The Kent area does a lot of work in maintaining local footpaths, removing obstructions, making sure that landowners don't block them off. And the National Ramblers are another important sort of political campaign organisation that advocates for open access to the countryside and to maintaining the rights of way and to making sure that everybody in the country can use them. So do join the Canterbury Ramblers if you're interested in walking and if you like the countryside. Okay, so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to take you on a virtual walk, 5.5-mile walk starting at Stodmarsh, and we're going to end at St Augustine's Abbey in Canterbury. In fact, we probably won't get that far because there's so much to talk about, and we might get to St Martin's Church if we're lucky. So this is a virtual walk, and all good walks start with a map. And this is, of course, the Ordnance Survey map, and I've marked the line there, which roughly follows the line of the Stour Valley Way, the Stour Valley Walk. And it really takes us through all the important historic sites. And what I really want to get over tonight is the connection between Old Park, which we're campaigning to save here tonight, and the rest of the landscape that connects it all the way to Stodmarsh. So this is a single historic landscape. Now, I had a moment of revelation a couple of years ago, listening to the natural historians talking about an important wildlife corridor that connected the important sites in Old Park to the National Nature Reserve at Stodmarsh. It's important to realise it's all part of one landscape. Now, the landscape, I've given it a name because it hasn't got a name at the moment, and it's defined geographically by a low area of high ground extending along the Stour Valley, and it's about 1/2 mile wide by 5.5 miles long. And it's defined by geographically and topographically by being an area of high ground, not very high, but it reaches a height of about 155 feet. And it's defined on either side by 2 watercourses. We have the River Stour on one side, and we have the Lampen stream on the other, which is a small but very significant and ancient stream that rises near Beaksbourne and flows all the way to join the Stour at Stodmarsh. So this defines it, and this is the landscape that I'm going to be talking about. And this is a historic landscape, and this is the other thing I want to get over tonight, is how important this is as a historic landscape. And I believe it's one of the most important historic landscapes in England. Now, that's a big claim. And when you think of a historic landscape, you might think of somewhere like Wiltshire, Avebury, Stonehenge. But of course, that's a prehistoric landscape, so it doesn't quite count as a historic landscape. But I think this landscape here is actually one of the 3 or 4 most important historic landscapes in England. And it's virtually unknown. There are many people in the area who've almost never been to Old Park or explored this area. But I've come to realise just how important it is, because it covers such a wide range of history, going back 750 years to the Old Stone Age, through the Iron Age, Roman period, the early medieval, the late medieval, and then up to Napoleonic times, and finally right up to the Second World War and the Cold War. All these periods, and including the Tudor period as well. So all these periods are represented in Old Park. So I'm going to take you along this walk, and I'm going to show you some of the locations on the walk that connect it to this amazing history that it's got. Okay, so this is the area that I call the Augustan Hills in a bit more detail. You can see this area here in orange. This is the part of Old Park that's up for sale by the MOD at the moment. So this is the part we're campaigning to save for the people of Canterbury. But it's also part of a slightly wider landscape, this sort of pinker area there, which is the old military training ground, which goes right up to Moat Lane in Forwich. And then beyond that is this section here, which is called Trenley Park Wood, another historic landscape. And then finally, Storm Marsh right up the top there, which is, of course, the National Nature Reserve. So these are all part of a continuous wildlife corridor, but also part of this historic landscape. Now, the historic landscape is defined historically by its connection with St. Augustine's Abbey. Most of the land on the landscape was owned by St. Augustine's Abbey up until the dissolution in 1538. And it's the Abbey, of course, is here off the map at this point here. But the Abbey owned most of the land, including Stod Marsh and much of Old Park area itself, and Forwich, of course, where I live, which was about 2/3 of it was owned by the Abbey. So it's the historical connection between all these locations. Okay, let's start off then at Stod Marsh Nature Reserve. This is one of the most important wildlife sites in England, the biggest, most extensive location of reed beds. And it was created really after the mining in the early 1900s. The mines at Chislett, and there was a certain amount of subsidence. So that meant that the marshy areas around the River Stour flooded and created these wonderful areas of open lake with reed beds. And this is, of course, a haven for wildlife, all sorts of exciting birds. There are over 200 species of birds have been seen, including the bittern, the famous bittern, marsh harriers, and of course, water voles, otters, and beavers today. So an extraordinary amount of wildlife. And my favorite one is one called the shining ram's horn snail, which is very rare. And there's apparently a micro moth called the Kent neb, which I've never heard of until recently, but I'd love to see one. It's a tiny, tiny moth, and its only location is here on the nature reserve. So a very important place. Historically, this area was probably used for the raising of horses. Stod Marsh. Stod means mare or horse, and marsh, of course, is a marsh. So the monks at St. Augustine's Abbey would use this area for the raising of horses, a very important and lucrative trade for them. So let's start our walk here. We're going to walk up to the village. This is the village now of Stod Marsh, which has got a nice pub, the Red Lion, and also this pretty church called St. Mary's Church. And if you go into the porchway there, on the doorway, there's a stone doorway going into the church, and there's some marvelous medieval graffiti on the doorway. On the right-hand side, there's one of these sundials. So that's one of these circular things that people used to use to tell them the time for the next service. They stick a stick in the middle of it, and the shadow would fall on one of the the radii of the circle. On the other side, there's something even more interesting, and that's the outline of some crosses, which are Crusader crosses, so like Templar crosses with widened edges to them. And this could have been left by, we like to think, by perhaps a Crusader returning from the Crusades in the 11th or 12th century. And this places like Stod Marsh are often used as little ports because they're right on the Wonsum estuary. And sometimes when the winds were against you, you couldn't get any further up the Stour, and you'd disembark at a place like Stod Marsh. So it might have been a little port in the Middle Ages. Okay, so moving up from the village, we go up the hill on the Stod Marsh Road. This is the Ridgeway Road that goes to the Littlebourne Road eventually. And we come to a place called Trenley Park Woods. Now, Trenley Park Woods, this is a view of it from Forwich Lakes, and you can get an idea of the topography of the Augustan Hills, okay? You can see it's a low hills. It's almost a plateau, really. It doesn't vary very much in height, but you can see the shape of it from here. And at this point, it's covered in a dense carpet of foliage, which is Trenley Park Woods, which is a very historic wood. And if you go into the woods, then there's some beautiful trees. This is one of my favorites. This is a beech tree. Most of the Trenley Park wood is coppice, chestnut coppice, which would have been planted about 250 years ago. Before that, it would be much more open, and it was used as a hunting park. Now, any location with park in the name usually means something to do with hunting, and this goes back to the Middle Ages. And the park is the remnants of a hunting park created for a man called Bishop Odo. So you've probably all heard of Bishop Odo. Bishop Odo was the half-brother of William the Conqueror, came over with the Conqueror 1066, fought in the Battle of Hastings, and he had a manor at Wickham, became one of the wealthiest men in the country, the equivalent of a multi-billionaire today, so a very wealthy man, the Earl of Kent. And he, like all wealthy men, he wanted the ultimate luxury, which was a hunting park. So he created one at Trenley Park Woods, which still, most of it still survives to this day. And of course, Bishop Odo was almost certainly the patron of the Bayeux Tapestry. He had it created for the opening of his new cathedral in Bayeux. But as I'm sure you all know, the Bayeux Tapestry was almost certainly made in Canterbury at St Augustine's Abbey. I haven't got time to go into all the reasons why we think that, but most scholars today think that was the location of the creation of this wonderful medieval artifact. And Bishop Odo was one of the people depicted in the tapestry. Four of the men depicted in the tapestry had close connections with the abbey, and the people like Vital, Woodard, and the bishop, the Abbot Scotland is probably depicted there as well. And there's all sorts of reasons that we think it was created in Canterbury. So this is a nice picture of the bishop. He's at the middle of the Battle of Hastings. You can see him there in the centre, riding his black horse. This is the turning point of the battle. The English have been defending with their shield wall. The Normans have been attacking up the hill. You can see the hill on the left there, on this side here, and it's defended by the English there, who are not wearing armour. These are just ordinary herdsmen, ordinary farmers probably. And the young knights are running away from the English. They've decided they've had enough. They're going to run away. And the bishop is there waving his club above him. And the inscription above it said, "Here, Bishop Odo, holding his club, encourages the lads." So he's trying to rally the troops, the cavalry, back for another attack on the English shield wall. Bishops, he was a bishop, and bishops weren't allowed to spill blood. So when they were in battle, they used to carry a club instead. This is the way, instead of a short sword, this is the way of getting around the rules. So very important man. Now, a little bit further, coming out of Trenley Park Woods, come to Stodmarsh Road, and on the right, there are the Christchurch University playing fields. And in the 1950s, 1954, Bretts were scraping off this topsoil to extract the gravel underneath, and they came across some interesting marks. They called in the local archaeologist, a man called Jenkins, and he examined the marks, and he realized this was the remains of an Iron Age roundhouse. This is the earliest known permanent settlement on the Augustan Hills. This is a reconstruction, of course, from the Butzer Museum in Sussex. And it would have just been a single roundhouse with a few farm buildings and some paling around it, a fence around it to keep the animals in. We know it's dated, we know that it was burnt down, and we can date the fragments which date to around about 43 AD. Now, if that rings a bell, that's the date of the second invasion of Britain by the Romans. This was the successful invasion that took place in AD 43. So it's intriguing to consider whether this house was burnt down as a result of that invasion, which was, of course, been coming from the coast, from Richborough. So very interesting connection there, but there's nothing much remaining of it today. Okay, so I'd like to take you to my hometown, which is Fordwich, which I've lived there for nearly 40 years now. Fordwich is the smallest town in Britain, famously, an extremely historic place. It was the port for Canterbury. So all the goods for Canterbury, heavy goods, would be shipped up the River Stour, unshipped there, put onto carts and taken into Canterbury. You couldn't navigate the Stour higher than Fordwich. So it's a wonderfully historic place. And of course, the monks from the Augustine's Abbey would have used it as their export-import location, where they would ship out their goods, their agricultural goods, and take in all the goods they imported from France and from the rest of the country. Do visit it. There's a wonderful Tudor town hall on the left there. You can see that one. That was built in 1544 in the time of Henry VIII. Wonderful to see inside. It's got the town jail at the bottom and the town crane on the other side, which was for lifting the goods out of the river. The other building, of course, is the church, St Mary the Virgin Church, and it's completely unmodernized inside. Again, well worth a visit. Unfortunately, I haven't got time to give you the guided tour. There's so much to see. But this is probably the most mysterious thing inside the church, known as the Fordwich Stone. Nobody knows where it came from, but almost certainly they think it came from St Augustine's Abbey. It's a large block of stone, about 5 foot long by 3 foot high. It's made of Oolitic limestone from the Bath region, which means it was almost certainly a Roman stone, but it was recarved later. It's dated probably to around about the 12th century, but it could be much earlier. It's thought to have been a dummy shrine, a place to mark the location of a very important shrine at St. Augustine's Abbey, possibly St. Augustine himself. How it got to Forwich, we don't know, but after the dissolution, all the stones from the abbey were shipped back down to Forwich to be shipped back out to the coast to rebuild the castles on the coast and the walls of Calais. But this is the Forwich stone. I think it could be earlier. The stone that it most resembles is the header stone at Peterborough Cathedral, which is about the same size and shape, carved in a similar sort of way, but that's much earlier. That's Anglo-Saxon, dated to the 9th century. So a great mystery. We really don't know how it got to Forwich. Okay, so moving on from Forwich, we go up the hill now, parallel to Moat Lane, and then turn right across the field. So we go across the west field, and then we come to the second field there. Again, this was used for gravel extraction, and this abuts onto the eastern edge of a place called Chequers Wood, which of course is part of the name of the Friends of Old Park and Chequers Wood. It's a site of special scientific interest and extends over the golf course in a sort of crescent shape. And this is a very important place of ancient woodland. But it's also important because it's the location of the discovery of the famous Fordwich hand axes. Now, I don't know if any of you came last year to that meeting where we were given a wonderful description by Alistair Keyes of Cambridge University of a new investigation into the Fordwich hand axes. But they go back, the discovery goes back to the 1920s when they were taking off the topsoil. The workmen discovered these interesting looking stones. They called in the local amateur archaeologists led by a man called Tom Bowes of Herne Bay. And they collected all these stones and they realized that they were Paleolithic hand axes, flint hand axes. And they're thought to have been some of the earliest known examples of hand axes discovered in the entire country. So this is a really, really important site. Now, unfortunately, the collection wasn't kept together. Some of it went to Herne Bay Museum, some went to Quex Park. There's a few at the Beanie Museum, which you can actually see, but most of them went to the British Museum. And a lot of the information was lost about them. So recently, there's been some more investigations using high-tech scientific investigations, infrared spectroscopy, which thermoluminescent spectroscopy, which can date the last time these items were exposed to sunlight. This is analysing the sand that adheres to the stone hand axes. So the stone hand axes have been reanalyzed, and they realised that they date probably between 775 and 450,000 years ago. Now imagine that, almost 750,000 years old. So these are the oldest stone hand axes that have been discovered. There's sites with older evidence of human habitation on the coast of Norfolk and also Boxgrove, but this is the only excavatable site that has revealed complete hand axes. So it's a site of European, possibly even world importance. Now, these people would have been Homo heidelbergensis, so that's not Homo sapiens. This is an earlier species of human beings who would have come over on the land bridge from Europe when there was still a connection across the channel. And they were foragers. They would have lived by hunting and foraging for food. They would have hunted animals like small elephant and rhinoceroses. So they were very skilled hunters. And you can see the skull on the left. That's a Homo heidelbergensis. And the one on the picture on the right there are some of the hand axes at Herne Bay Museum. So this is a picture. They would have lived in small family groups, perhaps 20 to 30 people, and they would have lived by foraging. They would have probably had clothes from skins. And because of this wonderful discovery recently in Suffolk, there's been discovery of some iron pyrites, which they think was used by the same people, Homo heidelbergensis, to create fire. So they'd have used it to make sparks with flints and create fire. So we think that our Homo heidelbergensis might well have had fire themselves, and this would have meant they could survive the cold conditions. And this was, they would have come here between the ice ages, but they wouldn't have survived during the ice age, but they would have been able to cope with quite cold conditions. Okay, so going on from Chequers Wood, we now come to one of my favourite parts of Old Park, which I call the High Park. The natural historians call it the acid grassland, and this is the very rare habitat that we have on the highest part, the open part of the park. Very poor soils, very sandy soils, as you can see. So a habitat that encourages the growth of unusual and rare plants and birds and animals. And if you go there, in the spring, and starting now, the gorse is coming out already. But if you go there at the peak of the gorse, there's a wonderful sight, this extent of golden gorse, and this amazing sweet scent, like coconut scent that comes from it. The natural historians don't much like the gorse because it sort of drives out a lot of the other species, but I think it's absolutely magnificent. Okay, so moving on now, we come back down off the hill to the cycle track that connects Canterbury to Fulbridge, and we come to one of the most beautiful parts of the old park, which is Reed Pond. And this is a nice winter picture of it. And I was there today, and all along as I walked past today to Canterbury, I could see there was dozens and dozens of toads, all busily mating and producing toad spawn. There's actually toad spawn there today, which I think has only arrived in the last 24 hours, isn't it? So it's quite recent. So these toads are all doing their thing there. There's dozens and dozens of them, and they're all around the edges, and they seem to be having a good time. So it's definitely worth going. Of course, the Reed Pond is a fairly recent arrival on the park. It was probably created in the 1880s by the British Army, who were stationed locally. They dammed a small stream. There's a little spring further up the hill, and they dammed the stream, and we think they created it as a swimming pool for the troops. So it's only been there for since the 1880s. But this is a connection to another important factor of the old park, which is its use or the hills, the Augustan Hills, as a water supply for the Canterbury area. Okay, so the soil on the top is porous, it's sand and gravel, but below that there's a layer of clay, and of course the rain soaks into the porous layers, and it comes out as springs along the line, perhaps around about the sort of 20-30 meter level of the side of the hill. And there are lots of these springs. There's 6 or 8 of them all the way to Fulbridge. Fulbridge itself has its own water supply. The spring, which is near the church there, and that's used to supply the town of Fulbridge with its water. And these buildings here are known as conduit houses. Now, these were created by the monks of Canterbury to provide them with clear, clean water. Now, even in the Middle Ages, people knew it was dangerous to drink the water from the river. It was polluted by human waste. And even the wells weren't much better. So the best water came from the hills, clear, pure water, which came from the springs. And the monks developed a most amazingly sophisticated water system to bring the water down to their abbeys. So there were 2 abbeys in the Middle Ages. There was Christchurch Priory and St. Augustine's Abbey, both to some extent rivals. So they built their own water systems. They didn't share one. And the one on the left here, which is this one here, is the St. Augustine's conduit house. Now, the water was channeled from the springs in pipes and brought into this area here, which was like a sort of settling pond and a storage area. You can see the little tunnels at the top there where the water came in. And from there, it was allowed to settle, to clarify, and then it was piped down the hill. This one would have been down the hill direct to St. Augustine's Abbey. So it provided the monks there with clean, clear water. The one on the right-hand side is from the Christchurch Priory, which is much less well known. This is in the grounds of the Prince of Wales Youth Club in the car park there. You can sneak in there and have a quick look if you want. I don't think they mind too much, but it's still there. And you can see the bottom level is an old building. You can see a nice Tudor arch there, but the top has been repaired. That was done by the army. It was used as a source of water for the army in the 19th century. But again, amazingly beautiful buildings which still survive. And these were built, would you believe it, in the 1160s, so right in the middle of the Middle Ages. And that's not all, because the pipes work came from the prior's conduit house down into the cathedral precincts. It came along the line of the military road. It entered the precincts through the city walls, and it went into the precincts of the priory. And you can see on the right there's a wonderful diagram which survives from this period, and it's like an engineer's diagram. It's actually beautifully drawn, and it's color-coded. You can see at the bottom here, this is where the conduit house is up here, and this is the pipeline, and it comes through some vineyards, and then through the city wall. That's the city wall there. And you can see the green line here, that's the clean water, as distinguished from the red line, which is the wastewater. And it comes up here, it comes through a sort of a point where it could be turned on and off like a sort of a valve, and then into the kitchens and the refectory for the monks. So they had nice clean water to cook with. And then up to the Prior Wybert's water tower, which still exists to this day. So this is Prior Wybert's water tower. And from there, the wastewater went into a fish pond and then back down through the monastery sluicing out the necessarium, that's the toilet block for the monks, and finally coming out here into the town ditch. So quite an astonishing piece of engineering from the Middle Ages, all coming from the Augustan Hills. I think this is actually quite unique, this system. Okay, so the water supply was also used for the city. This is at the bottom of Longport. So if you know Longport, there's this strange metal post in the pavement, which a lot of people don't know what it is, but it's actually a conduit for water. There would have been some sort of system there where people could fill up their bowls. This is probably dates from the 1830s, but the water supply was brought there in 1733. There's a plaque behind it, a bronze plaque there, commemorating the water supply that was brought here by a man called, whose name just escapes me for the moment, John Hales. And he brought it here, and he very proudly says he brought it here at my own expense. So he was very proud of his achievement. And the other picture there is the original water supply for Canterbury, which comes out of a little pipe there in the wall near St. Martin's Church. Lovely clear water, often flows beautifully there. That's fed from a spring right next to the church, hence the name Spring Lane, which is very close by. So this came into the Longport, and from there it went into the city through the city walls. It was stored in a cistern on the Burgate, and it supplied clean water right into the heart of the city. It probably did more good for the health of the people of Canterbury than anything else. So it was a wonderful achievement by John Hales. Okay, so let's return to our route now. We've come off the top of the old park. We've gone past Reed Pond, and we're now coming into the area near to St. Martin's Church. So I want to tell you about the military history of the area, which is quite astonishing. The military history goes back to the 1770s, and then during the Napoleonic era, there was a large expansion of the military barracks. They brought in about 3,000 to 4,000 troops to live in the city, and they built barracks parallel to the Surrey Road, along Military Road. And these troops were there to defend the country against Napoleonic invasion. They had an artillery barracks, they had an infantry barracks, and they had a cavalry barracks. And some of the buildings still survive. The original church, All Saints Church, was originally the barracks church, and there's still a building where they had was used for the cavalry school that survives. But apart from that, not much from that era survives. The later history was even more fascinating, and particularly the World War II history. Now, this site here was known as the Cherries. It's in St. Martin's Abbey. I won't tell you the present name of it because it's privately owned, but it's a very important site for something called the Canterbury Fortress. So let me take you back to 1940. The French and British armies had been defeated in France, but they managed to escape during the Dunkirk evacuation. They left all their equipment back in France, but that left England, Britain very vulnerable to invasion. Of course, Hitler was planning Operation Sea Lion. And the defences of Kent were built up because this was the most vulnerable part of the country. So they had 3 layers. They had an outer crust along the coast, just designed to delay an invasion. They had stop lines across the countryside. You can still see the pillboxes, but they had strong points known as fortresses, and Canterbury was designated as a fortress. So it was known as the Canterbury Fortress. And again, not designed to stop a German invasion. They were just designed to delay it as long as possible, but the soldiers were told to defend it to the last man and the last bullet. So Canterbury was a fortress area. There were 2 layers of fortification. The outer layer went around the Howe Barracks, which was on the top of St. Martin's Hill. And this was part of it. This was where the nerve center of the defenses was. This was an underground battle headquarters, which actually is still there. And it's in the grounds of this suburban villa, so a rather unlikely place. But they built it into the side of the hill. It consisted of 2 tunnels with 3 connecting into tunnels. They had a battery and a generator. They had communications room. And this would have been the nerve center for the defense of the Canterbury Fortress. So an extraordinary site. It's, again, not very well known, of course, in the city that it's still there, but of course it's in private property, so unfortunately we can't see it. And this was defended by lines of trenches, which still exist. This is in Timpson Wood. This is a line of trenches that extends about 80 metres. In fact, the line of trenches went all the way around, right down to Surrey Road, so it's quite extensive. You can see them on some of the aerial photographs of 1945. But there's also some along the cycle track, which you can see on the Surrey side of it. So fascinating place, really. So these things are still visible. The Canterbury Fortress had other structures associated with it. This is in the Dane John Garden. These are called shell shelters. Now, people think they're air raid shelters, but they're not. They're ammunition stores for a battery of guns that were sited in Dane John, as part of defending the inner circle of the Canterbury Fortress, which is along the city walls. So just imagine how the Germans invaded. There would have been a desperate battle in the trenches and along the city walls. Men would have been dying in their hundreds, thousands, and the city would have been completely destroyed. Of course, fortunately, it wasn't necessary, but it was a close thing. So it's part of Canterbury's history, I think, is little known. So the history goes right up to the Cold War. There was a Cold War observation post right on the highest part of the old park, and this was built in 1957. There was 1,500 of these observer corps positions built all over the country, and they were designed to survive a nuclear attack. So they were there for the observer corps to hide away and record the distance and the extent of nuclear explosions. And in Kent, of course, that would have been Manston Airport and Chatham Dockyards, which had been the strategically important targets that would have been targeted. And they were about 20 feet long by 7 foot wide. They were about 20 foot underground, and they had bunk beds, they had a chemical toilet, they had batteries and communications equipment and equipment for measuring the radiation and the extent of the nuclear explosions. They were designed to hold 2 to 3 observers, and these men were supposed to survive there for up to 3 weeks after a nuclear attack. And just imagine what it would have been like there. The country would have been devastating. Their families would have been completely unprotected, and these men would have had to stay underground to monitor the devastation that was going on all around them. This particular one comes from the bunker in Victory Wood in Faversham. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's sometimes open to the public. You can actually still go down it. The one in Old Park was demolished in 1992 after the end of the Cold War, so it no longer exists. But it's interesting, this amazing military history continued right up until the Cold War, and of course right up until about 10 years ago when the final barracks closed. And of course that's the reason that the Old Park is up for sale now. So these are the 2 of the surviving buildings from the military area. The one on the left here, this is St Albans Church, now called All Saints. And you can see 2 doors at the front there. That was so large numbers of the troops could get into the church quickly. So it's unusual to have 2 doors entrance into the church. And the other building is the Northgate Community Centre, which was the cavalry barracks. And people used to use that as a centre for entertaining the troops later on as well. Of course, that's along Military Road. So this brings us to probably, how are we doing for time? Yeah, perhaps we should finish here, I think. Yeah. Okay, so this is the final point on our route. Now, the true route should take us right down to St Augustine's Abbey. Lots and lots to say about that, but we haven't got time. So we're going to stop here at St Martin's Church, which you all know is part of the World Heritage Site, including the cathedral and St Augustine's Abbey. So a very, very important site, and of course the site of the longest continuously used site of Christian worship in the country. So a place that we should cherish. It's a lovely, peaceful place today. On the right there is the oldest part of the church. This would have been built before the time of the conversion. So this would have been the chapel for Queen Bertha, who was the Frankish princess that married King Ethelbert, came over in about 580. She was a Christian and she brought her own chaplain with her, and she used this building here for her place of worship. And you can still see lots of Roman tiles which are reused in the building there. Those red bricks there are Roman tiles. And this thing here is probably a reused Roman tombstone. There's a lintel above a doorway, which Queen Bertha herself would have used to enter the church. It's an absolutely fascinating place. There's sort of 3 doorways there, but just that one is thought to be the oldest one. Okay, so these I think are probably the strangest gravestones in Canterbury. This is on the edge of the graveyard of St Martin's, and this is commemorating the life of Walter Cousins. Now, you probably have all heard of Walter Cousins, have you? Walter Cousins was a man who was born in the 19th century. He was a builder and a sanitary engineer. He had a shop on the High Street in Canterbury, and he became fascinated by archaeology and history, and he collected items that he found during his building works, and he had a little museum on St Dunstan Street, which was open to the public. He was one of the founders of the Archaeological and Historical Societies, and he was also the man responsible for the Cousins stones, which I'll show you in a minute. But he had this amazing memorial to himself, which was put in after his death in 1928. And it consists of these two stones. There's no Christian symbolism whatsoever on this memorial. The one on the left is a granite stone and granite. The one on the right is unworked sarsen stone. Now, we don't know where he got it from or why it's there, but he must have picked it up sometime during his course of his duties in Canterbury. And I think it's a very strange thing to have as a memorial, but an interesting one. So the Cousins stones, which some of you may have heard of, Walter Cousins was responsible for putting these into the pavements in Canterbury. These were done in the 1920s when he was connected to the council. They were put in to commemorate lost historic buildings in Canterbury, and you can still see many of them. There were 27 of them in all to start with. There's probably 17 left today, and history nerds like myself love to go around to try and see how many we can find. And I found about 15 so far. I think there's 17 in all, but there's lots of them down the high street. They're all over the place. Walter Cousins himself, he actually lived in this converted windmill, which is in the Querns estate on top of St. Martin's Hill. So a lovely place for him to live. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this talk. I'd like to thank you all very much indeed for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm very happy to take questions. And I also have a small stock of my book, which is on sale for £10. Unfortunately, cash only today, as my card reader isn't working. But thank you all very much indeed for listening.
I think we can all say that we really enjoyed this talk, David. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. Lots of us probably haven't got knowledge of all that history. I certainly haven't. I would like to give you all the opportunity to ask some questions of David before we move on to slightly more formal business and more broadly about the Friends of Old Park. So if you would like to ask questions, anybody? William.
Thank you, David. Two questions. First of all, is there anything left of the ROC nuclear observation post? Anything left at all? And secondly, I read in your book that you paid attention to the rather mysterious stones in St. Augustine Abbey. What is your theory of those stones?
Okay.
Two separate questions.
Okay. Unfortunately, there's nothing left of the observation post. There is an area, I think I've identified the area. You can actually locate it from the Kent Historic Environment Record, which shows all the local archaeological sites. And it does locate it there where there's a lovely stand of pine trees on the top of Old Park. And there's an area there of overgrown of brambles and bushes where I think it was. But unfortunately, I've not been able to find anything left of it at all. So they did a thorough job, I think, of demolishing it. As regards to the sarsen stones, now I don't know if you all know about this, but there's two very mysterious stones in the grounds of St. Augustine's Abbey. They're right at the end of the west part of the church. Now, of course, the big Norman church there was built at the time of Abbot Scotland, almost as big as the cathedral, but at the west end, there were two big towers, Ethelbert and Augustine. And then there's two strange stones which don't fit the stones of the rest of the abbey. They're made of sarsen, which is this sort of sandstone, mudstone that occurs naturally in Kent. Obviously famously used in Stonehenge. One of them has been shaped, it's about 7 foot tall, so quite a substantial thing. It's been squared off. And the other one is an unworked piece of sarsen stone, which is within the footprint of the church. Now, if you ask the guides at the Abbey what they are, they say, oh, they're prehistoric. They're probably pre-Roman. That's all they say. They don't know anything about it. I have made inquiries amongst archaeologists. One of them said, oh, the tall one was probably a medieval cross, which is plausible because it's been squared off. It's about the right height. It doesn't explain why it's made of sarsen stone. The other one, though, is unworked. I don't think there's any explanation for it. Another archaeologist said, well, it's a complete mystery. I don't know. We'd love to have the time to investigate, but no one, as far as I know, has actually been able to investigate. I think Jeff Downer, who's the expert on the stones of Canterbury, has looked at them. He says they're definitely sarsen, but he doesn't come up with any theories as to how they got there. So who knows? They could have been rediscovered during the excavations of the 19th century. Perhaps they were transported there. Who knows? Why they're there, it's a complete mystery, and it's something that I think deserves a bit more investigation if it's possible to do it.
So Jeff Downer.
Jeff Downer, yes, yeah. He's written a small book on the stones of Canterbury. He does walks as well for the Canterbury Festival.
Any other questions from anybody?
Can you tell us anything about Old Park Farmhouse? Was that the farm that was owned the land of what's name?
Yes, well, it was a larger. Sorry.
So just because I don't think people could hear you from the back.
Right.
This is asking about the Old Park farmhouse.
Yeah, I don't know much about the history of it. I think it might be 18th century, but it was farmed. The whole area was farmed for a long time. I should have mentioned that the area was mainly used for as a hunting park, because that was created by Henry VIII in 1538. The land was owned by St Augustine's, so he dissolved the monastery and he created a hunting park there known as the King's New Park. So that is an alternative name for it. The farm, I don't know when the farm was there, but the area was obviously farmed. I think they used it for cattle and for sheep for a long time. There's also a lot of mineral extraction on Old Park. They used on the Surrey side, by the Surrey Road, they used to extract the brick earth there and make bricks out of it. There are big brickworks along the Surrey Road. So it had a very varied history. And this is all part of the, I think, the wonderful story of Old Park. But I don't know much about the farm itself.
I used to live there.
Oh, did you? Right, okay. So when was it built, you know?
I don't know. I worked for MOD. It was an MOD residential land.
Was it? Right, okay.
It was divided into two.
Yeah.
But then it was sold.
And it has a flagpole, doesn't it? Was that from the military time?
I don't know.
Right.
They had a separate area for growing vegetables.
Right.
And farmhouse and the farm buildings and that.
Any other questions from anybody? Can I go to the back first and then gentleman at the back?
What's the current situation with purchasing the old park from the military?
We're going to come on to that sort of question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So we're finishing with the history and the talk, and then, but I mean, that is, we will come on to that.
Just ask, about 20 years ago, I visited a patch of what was said to be native British daffodils in Trenley Wood.
Yeah.
I haven't been back for a long time. Are they still there?
I've never seen them myself, but I was told last week that they are still there.
Oh, really? I might get down there.
And yes, John.
Right. Just a couple of questions. One is, I was going to ask about King's Park, as you've explained how that was formed. I've seen an old map of it which shows a tournament, a tilting thing. Is there any remains of that?
Not that I know of, but you're right, it is on that map. It's a wonderful map. The park was designed by Henry VIII. He rebuilt some of the St Augustine's Abbey as a palace, and the idea was to have it as a reception for his fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, who was coming over from Flanders. And Henry was supposed to meet her there. I think she only stayed there one night, as far as I know. But he designed it so that he had a nice hunting park where he could go off and have happy manly activities hunting, and his lovely prospective new wife would stay at the palace. But of course, as we all know, it didn't work out.
I was told that both the Tinley Park and the King's Park were used for deer hunting. There are no deer in this account. So what happened to them?
I don't know. They're not supposed to be any now, are there? But there are some signs. Yeah.
They've gone as far as Denge Wood. So
yes.
Quite,
yeah.
And then the last little question is, you said the Reed Pond was built quite recently by the army. I had heard a story that it was built by medieval monks to rear carp.
Well, I haven't heard that, but you may be right. We don't really know the origins of it, but there is a dam there to dam it, and there are records of it being used for swimming by the troops. Yeah, so we don't know when it was constructed.
Do you want to say something, Jan?
Well, looking at the maps, the Reed Pond doesn't actually appear on any maps until the 19th century. So I'm a believer. I like you. I originally was told that it was for the monks fish on Fridays, but I think it's what you said. I think it's built by the army. It's a kind of army type dam.
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah.
And there were, of course, lots of market gardens up the valley.
Yes. Yeah.
There weren't trees then, and the little stream ran down. And I think it's called the Soldier Swimming Pool.
Thank you. Any other questions? Right, well, thank you very much, David, again.